All right, design systems, documentation, and Drupal. How to grow your agency, retain your clients, and not have to write any code. Who would want to do that? That sounds like a pretty good idea, right? So we've all been there before. You get a call from the client. It's Friday afternoon. Hey, just FYI, things have changed. That thing that we've been working on is no longer there. That brand that we were starting is no longer a thing, which has happened to us before. And you all of a sudden have to do the dreaded pivot, right? So pivots, in my opinion, test the true relationship of a client and agency relationship. It's how well can you pivot, how well can you manage that pivot that really solidifies your place with that client and helps you retain them for a long time. So if someone's coming to you and saying, hey, that thing we were building, that whatever we were doing, that process that we were going through, it all has to change. Everything's, the rug's pulled out from underneath you. How fast can you move? How fast can you retain control and build that trust that, hey, doesn't matter whatever comes our way, we're going to be able to do this. So we do that through design systems and documentation. And I'll show you how that plays into everything. So we're going to be talking about design systems. Raise your hand if you know what a design system is, if you use a design system. Awesome. For those that did raise your hands, how many of you are looking at building a design system, have heard about this thing called design systems and want to try it out? Anyone never hear of a design system and want to know what it is? Awesome. Cool. So for those of you that have been doing it, this may be a little bit redundant at times. For those of you that have never done it, this is awesome. This is fun stuff. And it's going to really change how you look at building a website, because no longer are you looking at a website from how do I build this with Drupal? You're looking at how do I build this for the brand? And then Drupal becomes a player in that. Okay? So we're going to talk through design systems. We're going to talk through who's involved in the design systems. I know just from the faces in the crowd, from folks that I know, we've got a wide variety of positions at various companies here. And we're going to talk about kind of what those positions' role in the whole process is and make sure that everyone's included in that. And then we're going to talk about documentation. What makes good documentation? Where do they live? How do we write them? Why do we write them? And then we'll talk about discovery, what we call at our agency discovery, but that's kind of how we wrap all this together. And then we'll go through how does that actually translate to growing your agency. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Teitzel, founder, CEO of Cellar Door Locker Source. Whole bunch of fun stuff. Started in Drupal in 2009, and since then I've been involved in both Drupal, also have been involved in the WordPress community and various other online communities. And I run an agency, and our agency works with a variety of clients, everything from small startups to Fortune 100s and the largest out there. And so through that process of working with sites of all sizes, we've kind of come across, we're building the same things over and over and over again. And every client, every site has the exact same needs. About a decade or so ago, Brad Frost came out with this idea of the atomic design system, and we all started kind of adopting whatever atomic design was. Pattern Lab, we started getting into these idea of patterns. What we're going to talk about now is kind of the next evolution of that, and what is a design system. But to get there, we're going to first talk about what isn't a design system. So the first thing a design system is it's not just components. Everyone thinks that a design system is like, hey, I've got a bunch of components, I've got a design system. That's not true. Components are part of it, they're a piece of it, but it's not the whole thing. A design system should be informational around the entire brand, around the entire ecosystem. It shouldn't just be a component that works on one screen, it should be an idea that works on all screens, all places. It's not just a brand guide. So we've gotten these super fancy brand guides. They're PDF books that look like they could be printed into a coffee table book. They've got all the colors, all the logos, how to use it, how to space it, how not to use it, how to do this. That's great, but that's not a design system. That feeds the design system, but it's not a design system. And then the last one is a design system isn't complex by nature. It can get complex, and some of the more sophisticated design systems can get bigger and more complex. But the thing that I want to make sure that everyone here today understands is that to start building and start working with design systems, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complex. You can start small. So, before I get on to this, for those that don't know me, very conversational, very open. If you've got a question, just raise your hand. If you want to heckle like we were talking about earlier, by all means do it. Just know that it's a two-way street, so I may push it right back at you. But if I'm moving too fast, or if I glance over a point and keep on going and you want more on that, just raise your hand. Happy to answer questions throughout. We'll have time for questions at the end as well. So let's look at what a mature design system looks like. A mature design system is going to have your core design system. On top of that, you're going to have technology-specific implementation. So we've actually built design systems that have worked on webs, on the website, on the tablet, on phones, on watches, on TVs, on ATMs at banks. A design system will have various amount of implementations, but they all build off the core. From there, you start building out recipes. So how do things all kind of work together? Recipes are larger groupings of items, right? How things are coming together. Then you have smart components, and then that eventually makes the product. Smart components are kind of dynamic components that are going to take in a bunch of different information. They're going to work together with recipes and what technology it's on. It's going to bundle it all up, and it's going to make the product. Now, this stack looks complex. This stack has a lot of arrows, but at the base of it is your core design system. So if you're starting off and you have a product, or you're working with a brand as an agency and you're like, I don't know where to start at the bottom. Don't try to do all of these stacks at once, but this is what a modern, mature design system will look like. And Brad's a really great guy. We've gotten a chance to work with him a few times now. And he says it's critical for a design system or architecture to only be as complex as it needs to be, and add additional layers of complexity only when real need arises. Now, the key word there is real need. Who determines what the real need is, right? We all get in there, we're like, well, I need this button that's going to look like this and this way and this form, but only on that one page. We call those unicorns. We don't like unicorns. Unicorns are pretty, they're fun to play with, fun to ride if you can find one, but don't put them in your design system, all right? And only make it as complex as you need as that complexity arises. So, now that we've established what they're not, let's talk about what they are before we start getting into the components and the pieces. The way I like to look at it is a design system is a common agreement from all the parties involved, from design to development and everyone in between on how the brand is built and how it is presented. So this talks about voice, this talks about color, this talks about the meanings behind things. It's going to be documenting not only the components, but some of the technical aspects. And so the technical implementation recipes are used to speed up development. This is a big thing that we like to emphasize with our clients, is that in order to speed up, we have to slow down. We have to take these steps at the beginning, and then things can start, right? If we just start throwing code on screen and going for it, that's great. We can build you a site. But when it comes to site number 2, number 3, number 4, you're going to be doing the exact same process over and over and over again. We just had a client that we took a 6-month project to roll them out an e-commerce site. It shouldn't have taken 6 months to do, but it was because we were building a fundamental design system and capabilities behind it. And then they said, okay, we want to roll out number 2. Number 2 is 60 days, right? Because we had that base design system, number 2, number 3, number 4 become a lot faster, right? And so, and then the other thing a design system often will have is a clear glossary of all the terms used and what they mean. So I'll be talking about it here in a minute. There's a website called OpenUI, and they're working on W3C standards for what is the UI of the web, but essentially building a design system for the web. And they have an amazing matrix that is like, I didn't take a screenshot of it because it would be way too small to see. It would just look like a blur. But if you go on there, it has a matrix of, this is a toast, this is a notification, this is a button, this is a pill, this is a this. every design system has something that they call it different, right? We may call it button, you may call it pushy thing. Whatever it is, your design system should have a glossary of what is that thing that's on the page, what is that thing that we're building, and how are we all going to talk about it. So that way when you say, oh, I want to make this block, I want to make this thing, you just go, oh, that's a toast, a button, text, headline, image, right? Boom, you now have a block. It's built of the smaller things. So, but if I'm talking toast and you're talking notification, we're gonna pass each other and not know what we're talking about. Design systems allow for companies to be agile in marketing and branding. The big thing that we like to focus on with design systems is that it's multimedia. It's not just the web. We're building interfaces for something. We've worked with hardware companies that have hardware consoles and a website and an app, and all of them need to look consistent. And part of the reason why you build those is not only do you want as a company to be agile, to be able to market and say, okay, I'm going to create new pages, I'm going to create new things, I'm going to build new sites. But as your customers, as your users start to get into a design system, they start to get familiar with it. That's why if you hand an iPad to a toddler, and if any of you parents have seen this happen, you hand an iPad to a toddler, they instantly know how to start using it. And then they keep using it, and every app, you're like, how do you know how to get into this app? How do you know how to do this thing? It's the same patterns over and over again. For those of us that use Google, you know the 3 dots means that there's more there. We all know that 3 lines, sometimes called a hamburger, sometimes called a menu, sometimes called an icon, means that there's a menu behind that, right? It's those design systems that if we start to build for our customers who are brands, their users, no matter if they're walking up to an ATM, they're on a physical device, or they're on the website, they understand where they're going, what they're doing, and what each piece means. The other nice thing is that once a design system is built and it's operating, it's very easy to onboard a developer. You bring a developer in, you say, here's your design system, it's built, it's operating. Hey, we need to take we're going to build a new recipe and it's going to take these 3 items. Great, the code snippets are already there for it. So piecing them together, building it all together becomes a lot easier. And so the overall team productivity goes up because all the code is handled in a very succinct and easy to use way. If you want to see a design system that is incredibly large, well thought out, go check out Carbon from IBM. There's also Material Design, Bootstrap, Tailwind. I mean, everyone kind of has their own. I really like how Carbon has built theirs out, and it's very informational. When you click on a piece, it'll tell you what it is, why it's used, where it's not used, what colors it can have, what colors it can't have, all that good stuff. So, as we've been talking about design systems, obviously it's going to include the brand, the logo, colors, fonts, all those different pieces, typography, iconography. If you've got custom iconography or custom typography, that's where it goes. Common elements are defined and allow them to be arranged and rearranged. It's going to be a guide of all your components and a guide of all your recipes. If at any time you're trying to think to yourself, is what I'm building the right thing, you should be able to dive into the design system and answer that question. And then the last thing is, there should be some rules around it. A lot of folks, when we start getting into design systems with them, think that we're trying to build them a cookie cutter site. They think that we're trying to corral them. The way I like to describe it is, you're a wild stallion, you can jump and buck and do whatever you want, we're just building the corral that you have to stay in, right? Like, we're giving you the edges and the boundaries, go hog wild in the middle of it, right? And the easiest way for me to describe that as a dad is Legos. My kids build with Legos all the time. I build with Legos all the time. If you're ever on a Zoom call with me, you'll see my stack of Star Wars Legos. Legos are awesome, but Legos are very simple. They're tubes and studs arranged in various ways, right? And if we look at what we're building on the web, if we look at what we're building on devices or in a design system, in essence, we're building a piece of Lego. Now, you can take that Lego, excuse me, you can take that Lego and make the Millennium Falcon if you want. You could probably take all of these pieces and build a Death Star. right? You could do whatever you want with it. It just happens to build into that manner. But if you've ever played with Legos, you know, except this is probably not the best set to describe this on because there are a lot of custom pieces here. But most of the time, it's like you need a 2x1 stud, or you need a 2x2. It's very common pieces that all of a sudden you start clicking them together and you got the Eiffel Tower, right? And so part of what we have been going through with design systems as they've started to mature is we keep going, why do we have to build yet another design system for yet another client? Why do we have to keep doing this over and over and over again? Design systems were built so that we didn't have to rebuild things, but we've been rebuilding design systems for every single client. And so Greg Whitworth, who's the head of the OpenUI project, and Brad Frost have kind of come together, and they are envisioning what they're calling the global design system. It's using the base that the OpenUI group has identified. They've done a ton of research on it. And so, looks like my slide got moved around here, so I'm going to move back and forth. But OpenUI is working on defining the things. Eventually, they want to create W3C standards for HTML that is accordion. And you would have an accordion element that you would put all your meta into, and out comes an accordion. As we all know, standards are slow. So we're working with Greg and Brad, and this is all kind of fairly new, but we're talking about, can we start building a design system now that's going to adhere to the standards that come into the future? But by building these design systems now, can we use that as a base theme for the eventual future of Drupal? This is all coming out of DrupalCon in Barcelona. We've had some conversations about it. No decisions have been made. But this is the direction that we're going, is like, can we finally once and for all build a design system for Drupal that says a button is a button is a button. We're not going to call it anything other than a button. It's going to have these specific elements to it. You're going to be able to define these certain things in your theme to declare what your button is. And then as you're using Layout Builder or the soon-to-come Experience Builder, it will pick up on those pieces, and now you're just theming the small layer that sits on top of the bricks, right? You're coloring the Lego bricks. You're not having to rebuild the Lego bricks over and over and over again. And so design systems with all of this take a ton of commitment. It's really easy to take a design system, say that you've got it, and then all of a sudden start creating a bunch of unicorns with it. It takes time, and don't focus solely on the how, focus on the what. So focus on, and also in here, focus on the why. Document, why did you make that decision? What are you making? Not just, here's the code for it, right? If all you have is Storybook, that's a great place to start. A design system should live outside of that with more information, okay? And so because of this, consumer brands need that consistency, and that's what we're trying to build into it. So again, it's not just, ideally, it's not just a web design system, it's a design system for everything they have. The other thing is it gives developers a voice in the room. A lot of the times, as developers, raise your hands, my people, you get handed a Photoshop or a PDF or whatever it is, a scratch on a napkin, and you're told, build this. And you're like, I don't like the look of that, or I don't think that button works well. Tough, build it, right? A design system is developers, designers coming together, equal footing, equal buy-in to say what actually works. And then shockingly, as I was talking about earlier, brands change, logos change. I had a client who literally changed their primary color palette weekly for probably 4 months. I had to create a very, very intricate mix-in that I could just put in like 3 colors and it would just rainbow the rest of the site for me because those 3 colors were changing because they couldn't make up their mind. And so a design system allows for that type of flexibility. You're not hard-coded into the decision of what is a logo, what are colors, what are fonts. All of a sudden they come to you and are like, hey, we don't like that purple color too much. We're going to be shifting it to green. You're like, cool, give me 5 minutes. Now you're green, right? A modern design system what we actually see and interact with is just a very thin layer on top of the rest of the building blocks underneath it. And this goes back to agile marketing, being agile as a brand, as an agency. If you're able to give that to your client and they can understand it and they can start using it, you are now empowering them to be a much faster, more mobile brand. And in today's market, with all of us having the collective brain capacity of a goldfish and attention span of a goldfish at times, fast brands win. And we need to be able to, as an agency, build fast brands. So, who's involved? Designers, surprise, surprise. Developer, because all of us nerds want control. Stakeholders, they're the ones who the design system supports. So this is normally the marketing team, the ad team. The marketing folks, they're the ones accountable for the results. And last but not least, project managers, because y'all are the ones that actually make things happen and herd all the cats in the right direction. So we're going to walk through this. Design system, designers, same name. We can all understand that one. But the thing you have to understand as a designer in a design system is that you are equal to everyone else. And you have a foot in the process or a say, but yours isn't the only voice in the room. And so sometimes a designer will start the design system. They'll be the origin of it, the idea of it. And then other times they take a design system and they'll modify it. Make sure you look at both UX and UI. So not just the interface, but also the experience. What's all these pieces together? How is somebody navigating through all of these different components? And please, 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 please leave the unicorns where they belong, which is in our imaginations and not on the screen. So don't create unicorns. One of our favorite things to do as a developer is to get in there and be like, that thing that you just wanted to make is about 5 pixels off of that thing that we've already made. Can we just call them the same thing and save some time? Or do you really want that unicorn that's 5 pixels different? It takes time, but you start getting into those conversations and you can have consensus with them. Developers, you are ensuring that the design system comes together. It's built leveraging reusable code. You're using variables where you can. You're making this thing as flexible as possible. Use Storybook or other frameworks to create technology agnostic components to bring them onto screen so somebody can see them. But you don't necessarily have to bring them into Drupal or bring them into WordPress or bring them wherever you're going. They just need to live somewhere that a QA person can come in and say, yes, this is a button, yes, it's red, and when I click on it, it does something. You work hand in hand with the designers, keeping them in check of their unicorns, making sure that nothing happens there. And then for some devs, this is a hard thing to do, but speak up, and you take a more prominent role in the team because developers have to have an equal say at the table. They're not just mashing code into the screen as directed. Marketing. I don't think there's too many marketing folks here, but for the folks on the recording, marketing, your goal is to define data-backed requests. So when you say, I want that button to be above that text, you should have a reason for it. You want to have data-driven insights for all of this. You want to be able to have methods to measure the impact of the design system. I've talked to a group at Microsoft, or someone that was formerly at Microsoft. They spent months and tens of thousands of dollars building a feature. They launched it into the product, and they found that no one used it over 6 months. Like literally no one used it. And so being able to measure the impact of various things allows you to say, let's iterate on that quickly, let's get it out. Oh, no one's using it, let's not use it anymore. Let's not put any more money into it. Your job is to always be looking out towards the future and looking towards the customer and trying to understand what they want and then bringing that back to the team. Because if all the designers and developers did was build for themselves, the website wouldn't really function very well. Let's be honest. And so marketing has to be constantly looking out for the client, looking out for what do they want and how do we drive it to them. And last but not least, project management. I love my PMs. They ensure everyone is heard. And this is an important thing is because a lot of the times you'll have loud voices in the room, mine normally, and then you'll have quiet voices in the room, and a PM's job is to sit there and say, okay, thank you, so-and-so, do you have anything to say, or do you have an input on this, right? Make sure that all the voices are heard. Also, PMs are great at this. I'm horrible at this. Document. We're going to talk about that here in a minute, but document every decision, not just what was decided, but why was it decided? Because 6 months from now, you're going to have an argument about why the hell is our button looking this way, and you're going to be able to go back and say, on this date, at this time, the customer agreed to it, and they put their name on it. Yep, we're good. That level of documentation helps so much in the tense times. You herd the cat towards the milestones. You coordinate and communicate, and make sure that everyone has equal say, equal voice, bringing them all together, and then bringing them to the finish line. Project managers, we wouldn't be able to operate without you.
Chris?
Yes?
I just think another key stakeholder on this that is the content authors.
Yeah,
Who the
true.
ones who actually, the final implementation of this design.
Very true.
Actually, what the end users see, the
Yep.
developers build it, the PMs manage it, but it's that last step is actually
Yep.
the authoring.
I tend to bulk content authors in with the marketers, but they do have separate roles in that, right? And that, again, when we look at it as I'm building a brick, I'm building studs, I'm building tubes, the content author, the marketers are taking a step back saying, are we building a Millennium Falcon? Are we building an X-Wing fighter? Are we building a Death Star? Like, what is this thing that we're building, right? And the thing that I love about content authors is, for those of you that ever worked in an international site, German is the language you hate the most because all of a sudden all of your layouts completely break when you have a 40-letter word in them, right? And so the content authors are there to help you say, hey, that's great when your design system looks like this in Storybook, but here's a real page that I just wrote and it looks like crap, right? And so the content authors, the marketers are the ones that help bring that, again, looking out for the customer, saying, hey, this may look good here, but once we move to right to left, everything breaks down. It doesn't look that well, right? Those are the voices that we need in the room. Last but not least, stakeholders. These are the folks that are paying everyone's check. They're the ones that hold the entire team accountable. And oftentimes, they're the least technical in the room. And so if your stakeholder knows nothing but, hey, I have a really shiny thing, that's nice. But if you show them, hey, we built this design system, it took a little bit longer than what a normal website would do. But now, like I said, we took 6 months, we can make it 60 days. Or we took your new marketing effort, it took you longer to write the copy than it did for us to build the page. That's what stakeholders like to see, right? That's what gets them writing the checks over and over and over again. And so documentation. For those of you that have worked with me, know that for me to say this is not easy. I am not a documenter. I run, I sprint, and I leave people to document behind me. But I have learned very much over the years that documentation matters. And documents are not written in stone. They can and should be live documents. They should change. They should update. If you have a piece of documentation for your project that has been written and then left for over a year, chances are that documentation isn't either applicable or you're not doing things right, because documentation should always be a living thing. And so documentation should be clear. We don't need high technical capabilities to read documentation. If your documentation is too technical, create a glossary, create a section for the nerds off somewhere else, and try to simplify it out. It needs to be concise. Don't go make an 80-page, how-to document for something that is a button. If it's a button, you just say, this is a button. It can have text up to this length. It's going to have these 3 states. It's going to have these 3 colors. Done. Documented. You don't have to go into a canonical history of the button in the HTML use of it or anything like that. And then the other thing is, we've found more often than not that centralized documents help better than dispersed documents. So if you have code documented here, design documented over here, brand documented down here, everything's all over the place. People spend most of their time either trying to find it or avoiding it and just focusing on the thing that's in front of them. So what we like to do is we like to bring all the documentation into one spot. That documentation for us all lives in the central task management system that we have, so that anytime you are given a task, you have a click or two should take you back to the core documentation of why, what, where, what are the decisions, what are you building, all that good stuff. The more centralized you can keep your docs, the better you are. We've even a few times for a couple of clients actually embedded the documents into the site, because getting them out of the site and into the tool was a jump too far. We said, fine, we'll build them into the site, so that now they just have they go to the admin menu and here's how to do everything in the site. Clear documentation. Write documentation for all parties involved. Use shared glossary for terms. We had a PM come on board that was not a technical PM, and we have a wiki, kind of an onboarding doc for our agency. And he took the time, and actually in every meeting that he was in for like the first couple of weeks was just writing down every word that he didn't know, and built the glossary of terms that we now have, we continue to add on to. So if somebody comes in, and I love to hire non-technical PMs, like non-traditional PMs. I love to bring them in because they have a different view, they have capabilities to lead, but they also have a different look on things, right? Great. What is Storybook, right? If they don't know what Storybook is, how do they know where to find it? How do they know what its job is, right? So a glossary of terms. Like I said, don't just document the what, document the why. Why was everything happening? What was involved? And then the other thing is, like, give editing rights to the team. Let everybody edit that document. If everyone's editing it, it becomes everyone's, not just the PMs or not just one person in the company. Concise, obviously, don't make it too verbose. A concise document is actually harder to write than a verbose document, but a concise document is going to let you get to the point quicker. Use the table of contents, book module, anything else you can find so that I can easily jump through. Again, if you gave me an 80-page document and say it's on page 62 and I don't have a link to get there and I have to scroll, you're not my friend, okay? And then, like I said, we like to put our documentation into ClickUp because that's the system that we use. But you put it in a general place where everyone can access it. Don't gatekeep the documentation away from people that may not be on the team. Again, stakeholders come in all different sizes and shapes. You've got content authors, you've got marketing, you've got stakeholders, you've got the technical team, you've got the designers. They're all given access to different systems. Make sure that they all have access to where the documentation lives. And so, wrapping this all up, discovery. For those of you that are at agencies, how many of you do paid discovery? Good. This is actually more than the last time I gave this talk. Only a couple hands rose in the room. The answer is yes, you can do paid discovery. We like to do paid discovery. Why? We get paid for it. That pays our bills. We can live. But more often than not, paid discovery allows you to have intentional design systems. It allows you to have intentional documentation. If you just start building and then start documenting along the way, we've all done that with the greatest of intentions, and it never ends up working out well. The design system becomes haphazard because we're only looking at it from what we're building. We're not looking at it and taking a step back. And so one of the things that we like to do with Discovery is build the design system, build out the documentation. We like to look at the holistic thing that we're going to build and make sure that everyone is in agreement on it before we actually go and build it. So it's scoped. We make sure that everyone knows what is and what isn't happening in there. Discovery is not going to be the first version of your site. Discovery is going to be us talking about your site, right? Make it valuable for both you and your clients. So don't undercut yourself if you're doing paid discovery. Paid discovery is work just like development. To us, there's no difference. You're paying us to do work, whether it's writing code or doing discovery. And then what we like to do is have a deliverable at the end of the document. For those of you that have been around long enough, you have clients you absolutely love, and you have clients that you start working with, and about 30 to 60 days later, you're like, oh dear God, when is this thing going to end? Yeah. This is when it ends. We have a scoped, short discovery period. We say, hey, at the end of this discovery period, we're going to hand you the blueprints to the site. We're going to give you a design system. We're going to give you documentation. We're going to give you everything you need, and you can have anyone build it. And that's a great opportunity for you to say, you know what? This may not be the project for us after going through this process, but here's how someone else can build it, right? It gives you that out. And I will say that we've used that a time or two as a great way to say this works, but not for us. But Also making it a deliverable, then normally to the person that you're working with is in the marketing department or something like that, they can turn around to their CMO and say, hey, you know that check you just wrote? We actually got something for it, right? The thing I hate to see people do is discovery, and then the client's like, what the hell did you do, right? That's not discovery, that's just black box projects, right? Like you're just working off to the side. Discovery is involving them and making sure that they're part of it. So I'll kind of skip through these because I want to make sure we got time for questions here. But as I said, scoped, budgeted. Make sure as we look at budgeting, another thing that we like to do is we like to set the culture of discovery even after the discovery period's over. So even as the project is going on, a new request comes in, it gets discovered, it gets agreed, it gets documented, it gets built, it gets rolled out, right? And what you're doing at the beginning of a project is just all the mechanisms to get that process rolling. But then as you're going along, you're setting that precedent of we're going to be doing this discovery on every single thing that comes through. And yeah, like I said, tangible, it can be a pitch deck, it can be the design system, it can be a whole number of things. A lot of the times we ask our clients, what will work best for your stakeholders? How does this best work? But it makes them feel good to have a document that they pay for. So at the end of the day, it's a pretty easy equation. Happy clients, stick around. Happy clients, make your agency grow, right? You get increased speed, which a lot of people look at as an agency as a bad thing, because all of a sudden I'm moving fast, I'm building things faster, and I can't charge as much money. The answer there is you're moving fast, you're building more, and you can go build more, right? We love to go into a budget and say, hey, you've got $50,000. We build the whole site in 30, now we got 20 to play with. It's not that we lost $20,000, it's that we gained $20,000 to go have some more fun with. And if you get your customer on board with that, they actually get to play around with it a bit more too. So it builds consensus. It gets you on their side. I like to always say that I like to sit on the opposite side of the table. I like to sit with the client. Design systems and documentation and paid discovery put you on their side. You are working alongside them. You're not on the opposite side just saying, you asked for this thing, I gave it to you, here it is. And then at the end of the day, agile clients are what we all want to get. We want to be able to have a client that's moving quickly, that's able to do things. We don't want to have a client that's like, hey, I want that thing. You're like, oh yeah, it's going to be about 2 weeks because I have to hand jam that into a JSON file over here, deploy it over there, make sure that the colors are matching over here, and it's going to go to this. No one likes that, right? It's busy work for you. It's poor experience for them, and they'll end up finding someone else that can actually make them agile. So, sorry, we'll put this all together here. So make sure that as we look at design systems, as we look at who's involved and the documentation of it, this is a process. It's an exercise. You're not going to get it right the first time, but it's something that you want to start doing on every single project. Again, not complex, just the basics. And at the end of the day, hopefully, we'll start to grow our agencies. We personally have seen our agency grow tremendously from slowing down, building design systems. It allows you to get into more complex projects. It allows you to get into more diverse projects. So you're not just in the web team now, you're in the app team and you're everywhere else. It gives you more lasting relationship with your clients. So with that, I think we've got about maybe 5 minutes-ish.
No, you get till 3:15.
Oh, I have till 3:15? Yeah. Oh, I thought I had 45 minutes.
No, you get full hour.
Well, I cruised through those last slides because I thought I only had 5 minutes. But I'll open it now for any questions. We can go back and look at some slides too if folks have questions about things. So I know I kind of cruised through a bunch of those topics, but any questions, thoughts, ideas around design systems and how you're using them?
Do you have like a preferred platform to build it, like Figma or something like that?
Yeah. So when we build our designers like Figma, our developers like Storybook, and so we tie those two together pretty quickly. So unfortunately, there's not a really good tool that does a one-to-one on that. There's a couple of tools that try to extract from Figma and drop into Storybook. But yeah, Figma for the design, that's kind of the de facto standard now. And the nice thing about Figma is they do allow for design system, like you can create your own design system. And then if your designer is able to, and on board with it, that design system now, every page that you go to create in Figma or you're laying out in Figma, they're just pulling pieces of the design system in. It makes their life a lot easier as well too. There are groups out there that have taken things like Carbon or some of the other design systems. What we're looking at with the global design system is actually building a Figma component of that so that you have the raw pieces in Figma to start building on top of as well. But yeah, Figma, Storybook are our two go-tos there.
Where are you keeping your documentation source of truth for the design system? Are you keeping it in Figma and Storybook? Is it in a separate external document set?
Yeah, so oftentimes all of our decisions, at least for us, are all in ClickUp because that's just where we live. But it can be a Google Doc. It can be Confluence in Jira. We've worked with clients that have Jira systems, and so they're using Confluence instead. So it's some sort of shared authorizable space. So Jira, ClickUp, Google Docs, somewhere like that. And again, the idea is as broadly accessible as possible. So sometimes that's why I have issues with Confluence and Jira, is that most of the time that's just for the nerds in the room that are in the design system or like building it. And because you have to pay a per seat fee, it becomes a little more different for that. So oftentimes we try to put those out into ClickUp or Google Docs or somewhere else where they can live more generically.
Can I chime in on that?
Oh, please do.
So one of the big reasons we're also using ClickUp is that, to a point that he was making earlier, those PRDs or those documents are living documents, and we treat them that way. So when the living document is done, it means we've delivered it. But we have it in ClickUp because we can literally take it out and stick that PRD in a sprint with new requirements being called out, new user stories, new whatevers. And so that document is holistic. It tells you everything you need to know about that atom or that molecule or whatever, right? Including all the user stories and everything. So we actually have it living to the point that it lands into our sprints, goes through our sprint process, and when it's delivered, it goes back into done.
Do you have to manually link to your Storybook or your Figma?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we have external sources because it's not just Figma that you're going to link out to or Storybook or any of that kind of stuff. You're also going to be linking out to where does it live on the server, where does it live in GitHub.
Yeah. So normally Figma's where the designers play. We like to, because Storybook gets built alongside the code. Storybook is where everyone consensus happens in Storybook, design happens in Figma, right? So everyone looks at Storybook, this is the actual implementation of it. Is this the thing that we wanted to build? Yes, great, that's the canonical source for it. And then, like Jonathan was saying, if it's in a place where we can then move it into a sprint or get work done on it, it makes it very easy to say, today you're building this recipe. Its PRD is click this link, here's all the documentation for it. In that documentation, we'll have the Storybook, where we want it to live in Storybook if it's not there, or anything along those lines. The other thing that we've run into with design systems and more mature design systems is you have to have a process of consensus around when does the design system change. Because we've worked in a design system that had multiple parties involved. And it was an app team, it was a web team, it was a completely different sub-brand of the company that was using it as well. And then everyone started to fight over, well, I need to change the button. How do I make that change on the button, right? And so what we worked through was a design system process that says, just like an open source project, I want to put up a change. I would like to recommend this change. And then that goes out to the decision makers of, do we integrate this change? How do we do this? Does it become canonical? Does it become a unicorn? Those decisions are made through a consensus. But as the design system starts to get more complex, we actually like to put rules around how and when the design system changes. Because then what that prevents you from having happen, that none of us have ever had a designer do this, update the designs, and they're like, well, it looks like that in the designs, right? And you're like, well, it looks like it now, but 2 days ago when I looked at it, it was green, it wasn't red, right? And they're like, well, it's red now, so it needs to be red, right? So, hypothetical situation that never actually happens in real life. But when that happens, you have a process for the designer to say, hey, that was green, I want it red. Everyone agrees, okay, we'll make it red. We update the documentation, we create the ticket, we go and do the update. You know what I mean? Like, the idea of a design system and documentation is it's this like mechanism, it's an engine that gets rolling, and if you can keep it going with the clients, they will start building onto that process and build it into their own internal process.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Any other questions? Folks that have design system horror stories or wins? Yeah?
Well, so one of the things that's been introduced is the documentation module called Simple Style Guide.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that does is it takes these particular things and puts them outside of a large documentation group. What would be your like opinion on how to like keep that in sync with the larger database?
So I don't think I've used Simple Style Guide, but if I understand correctly, what you're saying is it takes the theme and it kind of compiles it into a page that people can look at and use. Storybook-esque.
It does that, but then it also has, you can say like, this is the HTML that's made to create a button, this is what a button looks like.
Yeah.
So like you can add in stuff
Yep.
from your HTML. You can put it in and have it show up for the operator.
So, so that sounds a lot like Storybook, just kind of built into Drupal, or more or less, right? And one of the things that I like with the way that Drupal's theming system is going is we're moving towards single directory components. And that's part of what we're looking at doing with the global design system is like, can we build a set of single directory components that act as that base that then simple style sheets or style guides or something like that would be able to pull it in and look at it. The way we use those is even if it's not the canonical source that Storybook is or whatever, and it could be for that project, you determine this is where our canonical source is. Having a page like that on the site is wonders when it comes to automated testing, because then you have a single page that, I don't know, sometimes you even put this into a public space, just don't link to it anywhere. And then every time you're pushing an update, you're crawling that page and you're like, oops, I pressed a little bit on the CSS of this one button and that menu all of a sudden started to change. You'll start to see it on those type of pages. So I don't know that module particularly, but that method of like, let's get this all into a space where we can see it, use that for your visual regression testing. And that really gives you kind of a powerhouse to make sure your testing's on board with everything too. Yeah.
So are you using Layout Builder in your design system? And then you mentioned Experience Builder. I
Yes.
heard that.
That's my talk tomorrow.
Oh.
So,
Preview.
yeah, no, so Layout Builder is what we have. Experience Builder is what we're going to have. Show of hands, does anyone know or not know what Experience Builder is? Has anyone not run into it yet? Okay, awesome. So Experience Builder was announced by Dries in Lille 23, so a year ago. And then again in Portland when he announced the Starshot initiative. The idea behind Experience Builder is that while Starshot is simplifying the administration and use of Drupal, Experience Builder is that for the theming and layout system. It's going to be a WYSIWYG, very much visual page builder, so what you see is what you get. It actually is what you get. It's built off of single directory components, which is at the core of what Drupal's theming system is now. And so I'm super passionate about what Experience Builder can be, because if we do that right, we can not only take all of the joy and love that we have in Drupal, but we can start tackling sites both lower on the spectrum and higher on the spectrum than we are right now. It lets us take the design system that we've built and move it into an actual usable format. So for now, we use Layout Builder because that's kind of the tool that's there and it's available. So we create the single directory components, we tie them to blocks, blocks then get put into sections. And then if you have a design system, you can start building global blocks or global sections that are then patterns to use around the site. That's all kind of in line with the design system. The hard part about Layout Builder right now is it's still, I say this with all the love in the world, and I know that I'm being recorded. It's built by Drupal for Drupal. It's not built by Drupal for users. And so Layout Builder was a progression on our path towards being user-friendly, but it's still not the most user-friendly thing in the world. And so to that extent, when we're building now, that's kind of what we have to build with, but Experience Builder is going to be awesome. And the idea behind it is you can actually should be able to almost do the entire theme through the browser and never have to write a line of code if you do it right.
Is
So
it supposed to be in Drupal 10 or 11? No, it's not.
it'll be, well, it's not tied to a specific release version. It's tied to the capabilities of it. Right now, it's in really early, I wouldn't even say alpha stage. It's still very much being developed. Even the concepts behind it are still kind of being formed together. But it is, at the heart of it, going to be based on design systems. And so our goal and hope with it is that if we ship a universal design system, the Drupal design system with it, then all of the themes that get built on top of it, you're not going to have to go build like Bootstrap or Radix or any of those. We all use those because they have all the common tools that we want. But even then, we have fracturing within the community of what theme do you use, right? The idea here is if we're all creating a button, why does it matter who calls it a button or what theme calls it a button? The theme should be, I'm going to have a 10 pixel rounding on my buttons. I'm going to have a 20 pixel rounding. Mine's going to be blue. Mine's going to be shaded. Mine's going to be metallic. Those are the type of decisions a theme should make. It shouldn't have to redeclare the same thing over and over again. So Experience Builder being built on top of the idea of design systems will inherently give Drupal kind of a uniform system to build off of, and it's going to be much more rapid. So for anyone that's played with like Bricks or Gutenberg or Elementor or any of those where you can have the sidebar of things and you can start dragging them on the page, that's what Experience Builder is going to be like eventually. So really cool stuff. Really, really cool stuff. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Love design systems, hate design systems? Love your clients, hate your clients? We all love our clients. Our clients are listening right now, so we all love them. No, I say that with tongue in cheek, but a design system is not an easy process. It takes buy-in from both sides, so we have to make sure that our clients are on board for the ride, right? They're kind of used to, hey, I'm just going to build a site and it's just going to happen. And now we're going to be doing a lot of like pre-work before any of the real work happens. And that's why, again, having that discovery period, having a deliverable at the end helps get them on board with, this is going to be a process. You're not just going to get a site right out of the box. So, awesome.
Like you need a lot of collaboration with the brand team and the designers who, depending on the person you work with,
Yep.
they send you a design and it doesn't match someone else in their team's design. And you're trying to like make it more uniform.
Brand teams love design systems because a good design system, like I said, puts the corral around the wild horse. The content authors are then, we're not telling them you have a cookie cutter page, you're just typing text. It's, you have this whole bin of Legos and you can build whatever you want. Just don't use anything else besides a Lego. Like there's no Lincoln Logs in there. Like it's just Legos, right? So it's that type of idea of brand design folks love it because it puts boundaries on what they can do. And at the end, if you can convince the content folks, they end up liking it too because they get the freedom to build what they want and they don't have brand breathing down their neck every time they want to try to do something weird. So, yes?
You mentioned earlier if a client changes their mind about a color from red to green, you would just have to change that red into like 3 different places.
Yep.
What tools are you using for that? Are you using like CSS variables? Or?
Yep, CSS variables. Day in, day out. I will claim my elder millennial now and my age in saying that I'm a more curmudgeon of the development world. So I come from the SAS world, so it's SAS variables, CSS variables, whatever it is. What we like to define is rather than, and I had a really fun on one project, I came up with all these fun names for all of our colors. And I called like the purple was Wonka and the silver was Anduril because that's the sword of Aragon, and we handed it off to an offshore team, and they were like, what the hell is this, right? So it was very, very, very quickly realized that like primary, secondary, brand secondary, brand light, brand dark, those are our variables. And then all of your buttons are like brand dark, shade this, you can use mix-ins then to like alter the colors and move the colors. And like, that's what I said, I had a client that was shifting their colors so often that we just took in like the primary 3 colors that they wanted. We built all the subsidiaries of it that then used all the different shades and tones and whatever to build the buttons and the links and all the other things. Rather than each of those being individually variables, they all dial back to, most brands have like 4 or 5 top level colors. And so we'll put those in and then bake all the other colors off it. And then they come to us and they're like, hey, this happens more often. It's like, we built it for company X. Our parent company also has company Y that wants to use it. We want them to be similar, but company X is yellow based, company Y is green. Awesome. You implement it over here, you change this to green. They have a whole design system, they have a whole site that they're able to use. There's brand continuity, parent company likes it because all their subsidiaries are playing nice with each other. You as a developer are like, I can change colors all day long because it's only 3 lines of code, right? And it looks like it's changing more and more, but it's just, keep them baked into something simple, easy, brand primary, brand secondary, brand light, brand dark, brand dark 2, brand dark 1, things like that. Very simple, clear. And then as you go through your design system, you'll want to document the color of this button for primary is brand 1, right? So that way when somebody knows, okay, I'm changing the primary brand color to yellow, and then all of a sudden all the buttons on the side are yellow, and they're like, I don't like that. And you're like, well, it was decided that the primary button was the brand primary color. So you either want to change that or you keep it because that's the brand primary. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Just any advice for going backwards? So I have a site that I inherited. It's a school district. It's
Yep.
22 associated schools. Each of them has a palette of 3 different colors. And accessibility is now something they really want to take seriously.
Yep.
And so I've said, well, we've got to start with the design system, and we've got to kind of, do all the accessibility based on, change the school colors if we need to.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for going backwards?
Yes. You do bring up a great point that I didn't mention earlier, is that a design system should take accessibility into account. And that is a powerhouse for funds. It's like, hey, school district, you want to be compliant with accessibility laws. We need to build you a design system so that we can ensure every time a button is on the page, it has the right ARIA, it has the right descriptors. Every time there's an image there, it's going to have an alt. All of that gets baked into the design system. Going backwards on a design system is tough, but what you start to do, and Jonathan's actually really good at this, is you look at all the pieces and you start going, oh, that's just a 2-stud, 2x1 stud. Great, that's this. So you walk them through of like, hey, the site is going to change a little bit, but we're going to bring it all into conformance, right? And so you may have you have 20 sites. Like we're looking at doing this right now with 35 sites. University that has 35 sites. Each one runs their own thing. Each one runs their own theme. Each one runs their own custom CSS. It's a nightmare. What we're trying to tell them is bringing this all into a single design system can be deployed out to 35 different sites with color variations, but let's all come to an agreement on what does a form look like? What does our form input look like, right? Some people want drop shadow, some people want outline, some people want whatever. So at the end of the day, you tell them all of your stuff is going to change, but it's not going to holistically change, right? The other fun thing about that is if you are starting from a built site and moving backwards, you're like, now's the time to make change. And so you also offer it up as an opportunity of like, hey, if you hate how your site looks, now's the time to do a refresh. If we're going to be building this design system, let's not bake in bad practices. Let's actually do it the way we want. And so you also get the opportunity there. Selling it as an agency is a little harder because, again, we're going to be doing work that's already been done, but it's going to make you faster in the future. It's not always an easy sell, but we're going to be more conformant on accessibility. You're going to have the ability to update the design faster and easier and deploy that out. So like a school district, you could have the design system and the theme live at a top level that then gets distributed out to every single site, makes updates a lot easier. And so, yeah, but it really is just literally going page by page, looking at it, breaking off all the pieces and saying, do I have these in my Lego bin already? Am I close? If I'm close, okay, I'm going to pull that Lego piece back over and call it that. And then your design system starts to build. Through that process, that's when you start looking for unicorns, because you'll go through that process and all of a sudden you're like, that's really not like this, so I'm just going to make a unicorn. And then you get to the next page, you're like, that's not really like this, so I'm going to make another unicorn. Pretty soon, you have a design system that's just all unicorns, right? It's just all like screenshots of the page. That's not a design system. That's just a corral of unicorns.
Well, the one good thing I think is that's based off Bootstrap, so there is a sort of,
There is some underlying fundamentals there.
But the bad thing is that not all of the CSS that was then injected into it was using Bootstrap. So
Right. Yeah, so it's bringing all that back to the variables. It's bringing that all back to the basics. But then you can bake into it and say, this is how we're going to use it. Ideally, you can do that in a way that, if Bootstrap goes away and you want to start using Tailwind or something else, you're just defining, you already have the button is defined. Now you're just saying, like, this is how it's implemented in Tailwind, or this is how it's implemented in Bootstrap, rather than having to build a Bootstrap design system.
Yeah, and just kind of on the 35 site and some of the others, I'll also leverage your design system variants. So your design system, the primary, doesn't have to account for all variants, where one of them where the primary is blue buttons with white text or something like that, but then there's another brand, there's another one of the sites that they have a slightly different brand, and so they've spun up their own site and they've got all their own CSS, all this, they built it all themselves, because we're a bolder look or whatever. Well, that bolder look most often is actually just using elements from the original design system anyway, and so you build a design system variant where you're this is whatever variant bold, and now you're, instead of your primary color is your main button, it's now your tertiary color is your main button, because that's a bolder look and those types of things. And so going back to find that main one, and then you just start going down all the other sites and go okay, what is slightly different here and why? And then also Chris was commenting on that, there's a why. They need to explain why it is your button is fuchsia, because that's nowhere in anything that we're using.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And then that often, I think we found people who were using it or who had originally built it, oh well, actually no, we just chose that because we chose it. They're oh cool, we're going to get rid of that and we're going to suck it back into the design system and we'll make it flow. Right?
A good rule of thumb is every time you run across a unicorn, you ask why. Why is this here? And if you don't get a good reason, again, developers on the same foot as a designer, you have the ability in the design system to call them out and be that's wrong. Why do we have a unicorn for something that is 99.9%? If it's, hey, because the brand and the CEO say blah, 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 okay, fine, we'll make that concession. But if it's, I felt like that on last Wednesday when I built the site for this one, but not this one, it's not a good excuse. We're just going to make it back to the normal.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.